On the 6th of August, 1945, a young engineer was walking toward the docks in Hiroshima when he realized he had forgotten something at the office. He turned back to get it. At 15 minutes past 8, about 3 kilometers away, the first atomic bomb used in war detonated above the city. He survived it, burned down his left side, deaf in one ear, blinded for a time. The next day, injured and bandaged, he got on a train and went home to his wife and his baby son. Home was Nagasaki. 3 days later, he was standing in his office describing what he had seen, when the room filled with the same white light. This is a story about the most famous coincidence of the 20th century, and about why it was not a coincidence at all. His name was Tsutomu Yamaguchi. He was 29 years old. He was born in Nagasaki in 1916, and he worked for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries as a marine engineer, designing oil tankers. In the summer of 1945, he was sent to Hiroshima on a 3-month business trip with 2 colleagues, working long hours on a tanker design. The 6th of August was his last day. He was going home. That morning, walking toward the shipyard, he realized he had left his personal stamp behind, the small carved seal that Japanese workers use in place of a signature. He turned around and went back for it. Whether that saved him or nearly killed him, nobody can say. It is simply where he happened to be at 8:15 in the morning. He saw a bomber high overhead. He saw something drop, trailing parachutes. Then the sky turned white. He was roughly 3 kilometers from the point of detonation. The blast threw him. When he came to, he could not see. The eardrum in his left ear was ruptured. The left side of his upper body was badly burned. Hiroshima was gone. He found his 2 colleagues, both alive. They spent the night in an air raid shelter. And then Yamaguchi did the most human thing in this entire story. He wanted to go home. So the 3 of them made their way across a country whose railways were collapsing, through wreckage and refugee routes roughly 300 kilometers southwest. And on the 8th of August, he reached Nagasaki, where his wife Hasako and his infant son Katsutoshi were waiting. He went to a hospital. He was bandaged across his burns. And on the morning of the 9th of August, because that is what people did in 1945, he went to work. He was in the Mitsubishi office, still wrapped in bandages, giving his supervisor an account of what had happened in Hiroshima. He described a single bomb, 1 aircraft, 1 weapon, an entire city destroyed. His supervisor told him he was talking nonsense. No such thing existed. 1 bomb could not do that. At 2 minutes past 11, the same white light filled the room. The windows blew in. Yamaguchi went to the floor. He was, again, about 3 kilometers from ground zero. He had now been inside the blast radius of both atomic weapons ever used, against a city 3 days apart in 2 different cities 300 kilometers apart. His bandages were still on from the first one. His wife and son survived. She had gone out looking for burn ointment for him, which took her away from their home. He suffered fever and vomiting in the days after. His hair fell out. But he lived. 6 days later, the war ended. Here is where the story usually stops, with a shrug about the luckiest or unluckiest man who ever lived. 3 things are worth understanding instead. 1, 3 kilometers is the whole answer. Inside about 1 kilometer of an airburst of that size, survival is close to non-existent. The heat alone is beyond anything a body can withstand, and the blast wave does the rest. At 3 kilometers, you are in a completely different regime. Severe burns from the thermal flash if you are exposed, blast injuries, ruptured eardrums, flying glass. Serious, often fatal, but survivable. He was outside the lethal radius. Twice. That is not a miracle. It is a distance. 2, the second time, he had a building around him. In Hiroshima, he was outdoors, walking, with nothing between him and the flash, which is exactly why his burns were on the exposed left side of his body. In Nagasaki, he was inside an office, and Nagasaki itself is different terrain, a hilly city where the blast was partly confined by the valley it fell into. Nagasaki's bomb was the more powerful of the 2, and it killed fewer people largely because of that geography. He was shielded the second time. That is why the second bomb hurt him less than the first. 3, and this is the part that changes the whole story. He was not in both cities by chance. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a marine engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Mitsubishi built ships in Nagasaki. Mitsubishi also had major industrial operations in Hiroshima. That is why a Nagasaki man was sent on a 3-month posting to Hiroshima in the first place. Now, consider why those two cities were selected as targets. Because they were industrial and military port cities. Because of the shipyards, the factories, the war production. Read those two paragraphs again, and the coincidence dissolves. The same industrial geography that made Yamaguchi's employer send him from one city to the other is the geography that put both cities on the target list. He was not randomly present at both events. He was a shipbuilding engineer standing in the two places where Japan built ships. And he was not the only one. At least 160 people are believed to have experienced both bombings. 2 of them were Yamaguchi's own colleagues from that Hiroshima trip, Akira Iwanaga and Kuniyoshi Sato. Another was a kite maker named Shigeyoshi Morimoto, who survived Hiroshima from less than a kilometer away and then went home to Nagasaki. Yamaguchi is the only one officially recognized as surviving both. Not because he was the only one, because he was the one who filed the paperwork. Japan formally recognized Yamaguchi as a survivor of Nagasaki in 1957. It took until the 24th of March, 2009, 52 years later, for the government to also recognize his presence in Hiroshima. He had applied only that January at the age of 92. Why bother at 92? Not for compensation and not for the title. He said clearly what it was for. With the double exposure entered into the official record, it became a fact that would still be there after he was gone. Something a younger generation could not argue with. For most of his life, he had not talked about it. Then, in his 80s, he began. He wrote a memoir, he wrote poetry, he appeared in a documentary about double survivors that was screened at the United Nations in 2006. He spoke over and over for the abolition of nuclear weapons. He was not trying to be a symbol of luck. He was trying to be a witness, and he understood better than anyone alive that witnesses expire. Hisako, his wife, died in 2008 at 93. Tsutomu Yamaguchi died on the 4th of January 2010 of stomach cancer in Nagasaki, also at 93. The mayor of the city said that a precious storyteller had been lost. Between 1 and 200,000 people died in those two cities. One man walked out of both, spent 60 years saying almost nothing about it, and then at the very end went to the trouble of having it written down because he had worked out that the only thing more fragile than a human being is a memory with nobody left to carry it.